Now, you may recall the ballyhoo, the late lamented Home Secretary Jackie Smith claiming that thousands of women were being trafficked into Britain to work in the sex trade. There was an operation which involved just about every single police force in the country, the Border Agency, Serious Crime Agency, Foreign Office and more, to crack down on the trade. Well, the Guardian newspaper has discovered the operation didn't quite back up what the politicians claimed. A document the police tried long and hard to keep from the newspaper shows the nature and scale of trafficking was greatly exaggerated by politicians and media. Before we discuss it, Richard Watson reports.
Behind the tacky glitz of Britain's multi-million-pound sex industry appears to lie a nightmarish world of trafficked human beings. The government has even set up a dedicated human trafficking centre to investigate the extent of these crimes. Thousands of women trafficked into Britain against their will, coerced to work in the sex industry. It's made big headlines over the last few years and has been the subject of many ministerial pronouncements. But just how true is it? Speaking in November 2007, Labour MP Denis MacShane was highly critical of the poor conviction rate for the traffickers.
Given there are 25,000 sex slaves by Home Office estimates currently working in the massage parlours and brothels of Britain, this is a derisory figure.
25,000 sex slaves? Where did that come from? Not the Home Office, it seems. From the Daily Mirror, and its ultimate origin is a mystery. The following year, the then Home Secretary had this to say.
It isn't the case that there are not lots of women out there now who are being exploited. We are very concerned about the growth of trafficking, women who are effectively slaves brought into this country and held effectively against their will and used in the sex industry.
Police raids on brothels and massage parlours like this one in Birmingham were rolled out across the UK between 2007 and 2008 as part of a new tactic targeted against traffickers. It was called Operation Pentameter. According to the internal draft report by the UK Human Trafficking Centre, prepared in March this year and obtained by the Guardian newspaper, 406 people were arrested during this period. 67 were charged with trafficking in human beings. 15 were convicted of trafficking offences. But the Guardian report today says that 10 out of these 15 were convicted of providing transport with no coercion. The remaining 5 genuine traffickers predate Operation Pentameter, the Guardian says. But critics, and there will be many, say that even when there's no trafficking, coercion is involved.
The vast majority of women who are working or who are forced into prostitution will experience some form of coercion. Now, that could be physical or sexual abuse, but it could also be things like financial control. For example, many of the women interviewed identified the fact that they were paying large amounts of money to be able to access condoms, for example, or for food or accommodation. I would identify and be very concerned in those types of cases about debt bondage. In that type of situation, a pimp ensures that a woman runs up a debt which she can never repay, and that means that she cannot exit prostitution.
There are few obvious signs of prostitution in Soho, apart from adverts like these to upstairs flats known as walk-ups. There are another couple of these walk-ups in this alleyway in Soho. I went up and spoke to a woman who claimed to be managing a couple of prostitutes. Now, she didn't want to come on camera for obvious reasons, but she did claim once again the girls were working of their own free will. I suppose it's hard to know whether you're getting the full picture here, but there has been some academic research on this. 100 sex workers were interviewed for a paper to be published in 2 weeks. The researchers say they were careful to approach them directly and in secret and are confident of their results.
We found that overall, up to a maximum number of 10% of people felt that they had been involved in dynamics and in circumstances which they felt were unfair or which they also felt they were exploitation, amounting to exploitation. But within these, there were lots of nuances. So within these 10, a minority was corresponding to the horror stories that are usually, disseminated by governmental and governmental sources.
It's rare to find evidence in this field, but it seems coercion is a significant factor, but less than has been claimed.
Well, we're joined now by the former Minister for Europe, Denis MacShane, and by Niki Adams of the English Collective of Prostitutes. Denis MacShane, you claim there were 25,000 sex slaves. On the basis of this police operation, either every single police force in this country is staggeringly incompetent, or you made it up.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. That's pretty offensive. I took a report that was on the October 2005 in the Daily Mirror, quoting the Home Office and Amnesty International.
Your source was the Daily Mirror?
And Amnesty International? Are we saying Amnesty International is not a serious organisation? And the Home Office is not a serious organisation?
You still quote... You're quoting...
No, I'm
you're
not.
quoting the Mirror.
Here we are.
When you stood up...
Look, I'm sorry. This is just childish nonsense. I'm actually... Sarah Green of Amnesty International...
You don't stand by it now, though, surely? You don't stand by the ludicrous assertion that 25,000 women are trafficked into the UK every year. I thought that you were coming on the programme to apologise because the claim is so clearly ludicrous. And this Guardian article does begin to uncover the truth of what's actually going on. And more importantly, it really shows, it's going to be beginning to come out, the horrendous impact that this anti-trafficking campaign has had on women in the sex industry, starting with making it more...
Just hang on a second. Let's first of all clear up this question. Are you accepting that 25,000 was wrong?
Jeremy, I'm quoting. The point is, what we do know is that whether it's rape convictions...
You didn't believe it when you quoted the Daily Mirror in the House of Commons?
I'm sorry, Jeremy. Rape convictions in this country are about 5%.
We're not talking about rape.
Well, I'm sorry, the police, when it comes to sex crimes... Now, you mixed up Operation Pentameter, which actually is a research organisation. They've arrested some people. It's very difficult to get convictions for trafficking. I can list some of the cases of people who've been sent to prison for trafficking in Moldovans, Romanians. You have young women terrified to give evidence. You also, until quite recently, when women... You showed that operation in Birmingham, all the women then were immediately threatened with deportation. The pimps say, if you give any evidence, we'll go and sort out your families back home.
You're talking about something else now.
Well, no, I'm not.
Niki Adams, have you in your entire career never come across women who've been trafficked into this country?
I've come across 2 women. We have a very wide network in most towns and cities throughout the UK. 2 women. We see daily cases of women being prosecuted for prostitution offences. That's the majority.
And coerced women?
2 women have come to us who have been genuine victims of trafficking. One was a young woman from Africa who, when she went to try and claim asylum, was actually put in a prison, in an adult prison, and it took our campaign to get her out and to get her help.
If they're scared enough, they can't come to anyone like you.
Well, the anti-trafficking campaign and the legislation has made it more difficult for women to come forward and report violence. This kind of crusade, which has resulted in numerous raids, prosecutions and convictions for essentially consenting sex. Women who are working, consenting independently together are now facing brothel keeping charges, controlling charges, despite the fact that there's no force and coercion. Under those circumstances, women find it very difficult to come forward and report violence.
Jeremy,
plus, the new legislation is going to make the situation worse.
Go on.
1 second, I haven't finished.
The
new legislation...
You've dealt with it more effectively than I've ever done. Go on.
The new legislation is actually going to make the situation worse, and the new legislation is premised on these false figures. These false figures were the basis for that kind of campaign, and the Policing and Crime Bill, which says, one, is to criminalise clients, but it's also increasing criminalisation of sex workers.
Right. Let him deal with that previous point. Go on.
We had last week a PhD student brutally murdered who believed in this happy hooker belle de jour nonsense, a student who went out and prostituted herself. We had in Ipswich...
How many of the women in Ipswich were trafficked?
No, the point about the 2 combined, you want the details on trafficked women. Look at the Home Affairs Select Committee report of last year. Look at the people who are sent to prison, convicted by a jury, not by Newsnight. Ask why you haven't got on tonight. ESSO, that's like the English Collective of Prostitutes of the BBC franchise. These are women who've left being prostituted women and say, all but 2% are forced into prostitution.
Nobody denies there are all sorts of issues about prostitution,
can we go on to the legislation?
How it's policed in this country.
Can we go on to the legislation?
No, this is specifically to do with trafficked women, about whom you made a very serious case.
I said...
And it hasn't been borne out.
No, I said...